We have arrived at Resident Evil 3 Nemesis. Originally released on the Sony PlayStation on the 22nd of September 1999. Now over subsequent years it came to Windows, Dreamcast and GameCube, netting sales of 3.5 million, which is a step down from the previous year's entry of Resident Evil 2, which netted in at 4.5 million. This game is seen by the general fanbase as a step back from RE2, but for me, when I first played the game on its release, I fell in love with it, and it became my favourite entry for years. Resident Evil 3 is the oldest entry I'll be covering on this series of reviews, and it's been over 20 years since I played this game. So the questions I'll be answering over the course of this review are: does the game hold up playing it this many years after its release? What makes it so unique compared to the other entries in the series? And can I put my nostalgia aside and see the flaws the game has? Now if you've been enjoying my content, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and ring the bell so you never miss an upload. But enough of that, this review as always is split into plot, gameplay and presentation. Now let's dive in.
It all began as an ordinary day in September, an ordinary day in Raccoon City, a city controlled by Umbrella. No one dared to oppose them, and that lack of strength would ultimately lead to their destruction. I suppose they had to suffer the consequences of their actions, but there would be no forgiveness. If only they had had the courage to fight. It's true that once the wheels of justice begin to turn, nothing can stop them. Nothing. It was Raccoon City's last chance, and my last chance. My last escape.
It's September 28th, 1998. 2 months after the Arkley Mansion incident, we find Jill Valentine in Raccoon City, planning to make her escape from the prying eyes of Umbrella, when all hell breaks loose around her, and she is thrown into a cat and mouse game with Umbrella's newest bioweapon. Now in its simplest explanation, Resident Evil 3 is the same formula Resident Evil had followed from the previous 2 entries. Protagonists find themselves in a bad situation, and they need to find a way out. But this time the way it's approached is very different. It throws you immediately into the fray with more zombies than we've ever encountered before, and doesn't stop this rollercoaster at any point throughout its story run. You never really have time to stop, reflect, and build any sense of anxiety, as you're always taking it second by second, avoiding a pack of dogs here, running from crows there, dealing with seemingly endless hordes of zombies, all the while pursued by the kind of stalker that would make my obsession with Lady Dimitrescu look normal. Now that's not to say this pace means the story isn't effective. If anything, it elevates what the game is trying to accomplish. The story this time is a lot simpler than other entries. The amount of subplots and deep lore-rich files aren't as present or essential as they are in other titles. Instead, it relies solely on its characters to get us invested in Jill's struggle. During the early parts of the game, Jill encounters the UBCS, which stands for the Umbrella Biohazard Countermeasures Service. And it's here with these set of characters that things get interesting throughout the remainder of the game. Sure, Jill is Jill. She's the character we are playing as. She's our substitute for the experience, and we share her disbelief at Nemesis's ability to never give up.
Why won't you die?
Carlos is your main partner throughout the experience, and he helps support you in key sections and gives us direction for where to go and what to do next to move the story onwards. But it's Nikolai that has the honour of being the absolute scumbag the game really needed to make us hate someone. Everything about him screams suspicious. He's a little too interested in that sparking wire. He apparently died like 4 times throughout the game before he shows back up again. And most importantly, he's Russian. In the late 90s, the Russians were the de facto villain in pretty much all media. So hearing that accent immediately makes you think, he's up to something. It's paper thin to be honest, but that's how Resident Evil 3 is. It doesn't make you work for any of its story material. It's a summer blockbuster, not an Oscar winner. It gets the job done to move on to the next action-packed segment, but nothing more than that. With the previous entries in the series, you'd have a choice of 2 protagonists from the outset, with differences in gameplay and story for each of them. But here in RE3, they decide to ditch this and instead replace it with the ability to shape the story how you see fit. At 9 points across the game, you'll have choices to make. Now they call this live selection. It can be as simple as staying to fight or running, but others will change what happens to our favourite evil Russian, and give us the best cameo in the entire game. It's an interesting idea to let the story play out in this way. It gives a real incentive to replay the game to see the impact your choices can make on the way key events unfold. In comparison to how the predecessors handle replayability, I'd argue RE2 did it better, having 2 completely different protagonists with different plots, weapons, and the ability to affect each run based on the choices you made in a previous run. But I do applaud RE3 for trying something new here. Even if it doesn't reach the same heights, it does give tangible reason to want to return to Raccoon City time and time again. RE3 brings over the same fixed camera angles and pre-rendered backgrounds that made its predecessors so iconic, but decided to make some changes to the overall formula to varying results. Now let's begin with the positives. Resident Evil 3 plays like butter. It feels so fluid compared to its earlier entries, and in no small part, this is due to the quick turn, which first appeared here. It's crazy that such a small addition can make such a big difference to the way a game plays, especially when you need to back up and make space in a tight situation. It's become a staple in all games since RE3, and to be honest, it's no wonder. Gone are the days of having to run into a wall to turn at 45-degree angles. It looks so natural and feels perfect to have this extra layer of control, all the while sticking to the tank controls that made 1 and 2 feel so memorable. Another brilliant addition is the ammo creation system. Previously, ammunition was found across the environment, and it was your choice on when to take this ammo and its corresponding gun out into the wild to lay some zombies to eternal rest. And that's here too, but in RE3 the game gives us an extra layer: gunpowders, with which we can mix in a variety of ways to create different ammo types. Gunpowders come in 2 varieties, A and B. If you combine A with the reloading tool, you create pistol rounds. B creates shotgun rounds. So far, easy, right? Well, combining A and B together creates C gunpowder, which creates grenade rounds. So what happens if you mix C and B together, or C and A, or AAB, or CCC? The system is surprisingly deep, and the varieties of ammo you can create are incredible. On top of this, if you create the same ammunition multiple times, your skill increases, and you will create more of this ammunition per gunpowder. In short, what this system does is it gives you choice on what you want to prioritize. Do you want to save your gunpowder and make some crazy heavy hitting ammo, like for the Magnum or grenade freeze rounds? Or do you want shitloads of pistol and shotgun rounds to make you feel comfortable versus the hordes of enemies around every corner? It's a fantastic system, and I could spend the length of this video explaining every combination and its multipliers, but for the sake of your sanity and mine, I'll move on. Now, I've been criticised in previous reviews for not mentioning other modes that are available. Now, this is often because I don't think they're too relevant in reviewing the base experience, but here in RE3, I'll tip the hat. Resident Evil 3 was responsible for introducing the Mercenaries game mode, which is loved by fans to this day. Now, I can take or leave Mercenaries or any of these additive modes. I really don't care about them. I have enough to play without needing my playtime to be added to with some half-assed game mode. But when I think back to my time playing this on its release, I sweated Mercenaries. I did all the unlocks and really enjoyed playing through as the UBCS with their unique arsenal, trying to get further and further with the limited time available. So the question is, did I play it this time? No, of course not. I promised you guys a video of all the extra modes at a later date. I'm not forcing myself to play through it now. If anything, you're lucky I even gave it a mention. So say thank you and be happy you even got that. The final addition I'll praise here before we dive into some of the negatives is the environmental interactables. Red barrels. We all know what they do. It's built into video game logic as clearly as health packs or red flashing weak spots, but this is the first time they appeared in a Resident Evil game, and they do have some clever implementation in certain boss fights. Shooting the levers to drench Nemesis in acid, or shooting down the light to fry the gravedigger. It's cool little additions like this which I really appreciated. It's not mind-blowing or anything like that, but it's always fun to lead a horde into the path of a barrel and blast them to Kingdom Come. Now if I was reviewing this 20 years ago, I'd struggle to find a fault. I adored this game. But with a modern lens, it's quite easy to see flaws which are so blatant that I'm surprised I didn't care about them at the time. Now let's get the obvious one out of the way here. The dodge mechanic. It's absolutely trash. Like, tragically bad. On paper, it should be great. Chuck shit tons of enemies at you and give you an option to escape when it all goes south, as long as you're skilled enough to do so. But what is the timing? I have no idea. Sometimes I'm pulling it off no problem and feel like a god. But other times, I dodge successfully and still end up getting hit, and then most of the time, I fail it completely and run headfirst into a grab. Okay. Now if it's just me, please tell me where I'm going wrong in the comments, but surely after 2 runs through, I should have this mechanic nailed down by now. It's just so nebulous. It'll be the year 3055, man will have conquered the known universe, we'll live forever in cool ass cyborg bodies, Cyberpunk will have finally released on the PlayStation 50 without any flaws, and yet no one will know how to pull off a perfect dodge every time in Resident Evil 3. Let's keep going down this negative path, just for a moment. Nemesis himself. I remember being terrified of him as a kid. In playing it now, he's the easiest enemy to evade in the entire game, bar the spiders. Sure, he follows you, and his appearance always up the tension, but when it comes down to it, you can literally just run past him and he can't do anything about it. In boss fights, he's a different beast entirely, and can kick your ass if the dodges don't go your way. But when the whole game premise is based around this threat that constantly appears to make exploration dangerous, he really isn't all that, which is a real shame. Now granted, part of this is probably due to how menacing Mr. X was in RE2 Remake, so coming straight off that to this isn't a fair comparison in any way, but that's the hand it's been dealt. Now there's loads of ways they could have made him a challenge. Christ, if he even caught me once there would be something for me to reevaluate here. But as it stands, he just chased me a bit and didn't really do anything. The way he appears and creates this illusion that he's constantly in pursuit does work now as it did then, and his inclusion as the main enemy throughout the game is brilliant. It truly does make the game feel unique. But it's just a shame that it couldn't capture the same feelings I had when I first experienced the game all those years ago. Now I'm moving it back to some positives before I see you all mash that dislike button. One thing RE3 definitely remembers from its predecessors is how to create excellent puzzles. There are a number of them scattered across the game and all of them are enjoyable. Some I nailed first time.
I'm kind of a big deal.
But others I was left stumped and had to really think about. Now if there's ever a make or break for me in these reviews, it's puzzle implementation, and here I have to say, they are executed exceptionally well, breaking out the gameplay exactly when it's needed, while not being obnoxiously difficult or too simple. It's exactly what it needs to be, and it excels here. Now to end this segment, I want to explain something which I believe sets the game apart from its predecessors. I'm always stating how item conservation and choosing your targets is a key component to creating a survival horror experience. How limited resources creates its own tension by making you doubt yourself. Did you take the right items with you? Should you lose an extra inventory space by taking that heal or that gun? Well here, that's not really the case. There's plenty of ammunition to go around for all of your guns, especially when you get the hang of the ammo creation system. And you need that here, as there are tons of enemies, way more than we've ever had in a Resident Evil game before, with no real opportunity to avoid them, as they stack upon themselves in corridors and alleyways. You have to fight, and by God is it fun to do that. All the weapons have impact, and it'll forever be satisfying to mow down a group of zombies with one well-placed shotgun shell, blow them to smithereens with a grenade launcher, or watch their heads pop with a mine gun dart. It makes you feel like a badass. And it also helps that Jill can take an absolute beating before she goes into caution, let alone die at the hands of the zombies. Now this change in enemies and the ammo that goes alongside this creates a totally unique feel from the other entries in the series up to this point. And to my mind, it really succeeds here. I love being scared and stressing over my items as much as the next guy, but being able to have the classic controls and fixed camera angles I love, while kicking back, blowing tons of enemies away without regret, is a great marriage. Now, do I want this for the whole series? No, of course not. We see with that line threads with RE4, 5 and 6, but taking this experience as its own thing, I did really enjoy the unique formula that RE3 follows. Resident Evil 3 being released on the PlayStation 1 meant at the time it looked fantastic. I remember being in awe of the pre-rendered backdrops, and the FMVs were mind-blowing. 20 years on, not so much. The backgrounds still hold up, and the FMVs, weirdly enough, still look fantastic. But gameplay-wise, it's exceptionally hard to find items in the environment with how muddy everything looks in SD. I had to reteach myself to mash X across a given space to uncover ammunition or heals. I can't really fault it. The game is older than some of you watching this video, but if you haven't played this game before, be warned, it's certainly not a looker now. I played this game in the most authentic way I could. I used a PlayStation Classic and added the PS1 version of RE3 to the system so I could play it on an original PS1 controller and still capture the gameplay that you're watching now. There are better forms of emulation out there, with cleaner graphics and less jagged edges, but I wanted to try and recapture my experience as it originally was, or as close to it anyway. The downside to this is my wife, who normally enjoys watching me play through the Resident Evil games, had to leave after 30 minutes as it was making her eyes hurt. But what can you expect? It's a game of the time, and to me it sets off a cascade of nostalgia that blinds me to the ravages of time. Now when it comes to performances from the cast, it's really hit or miss, as usual for this time frame in RE. The fault here isn't the voice actors, but more so the script work. It's mega cheesy, and when you combine this with the limited animation available at the time, it creates some truly hilarious moments.
No, if we're gonna die, then we should get to choose when it happens.
It's certainly something we take for granted now, but back in the late 90s and early 2000s, this was the usual level of quality we'd get. Things have certainly changed for the better. Now when we come to the music, RE3 is superb. From the moment the game loads, you know you're in for a real treat. And it doesn't stop. From section to section, scene to scene, the music is standout, and I'd go so far as to say it's the best soundtrack in the entire series, without question. Now, I've included a number of tracks over the course of this review, but I barely scratched the surface. So do yourself a favour, boot up Spotify, give them a listen. They are truly exceptional. So overall, Resident Evil 3 Nemesis built on what came before, and implemented changes which make it stand apart from its predecessors. It took risks with live selection, ammo creation, quick turns and dodging, with many of these features still appearing in Resident Evil to this day. It often gets overlooked, but its impact on the series as a whole is without question. 20 years on, it doesn't have the same effect on me as it once did, especially when it comes to Nemesis. But as a whole, the game is immensely enjoyable to play. I'd encourage you to put 6 hours aside and dive in. You won't regret it. Thank you for your time. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, then put a like on it, tell me how to dodge properly in the comments, and subscribe to the channel for more reviews. Up next is Resident Evil 4, which I'm aiming to have out a week from now, so there's plenty more content to come. Thank you again. Take care of yourselves, take care of each other. See ya.